Look up at the sky for a second, that calm blue stretch above your head. During World War, it wasn't peaceful, it was a killing field. A place where metal screamed, engines roared, and men fought gravity, fear, and each other all at once. There were no safety nets up there, no second tries. Once a warplane lifted off the runway, the pilot was betting his life on raw horsepower, thin aluminum skin, and his own nerves of steel. These aircraft weren't just transportation. They were flying weapons, forged in factories that ran day and night, built to dominate the sky or die trying. Every nation in the war understood one brutal truth. Whoever ruled the air controlled everything below it. Tanks, ships, cities, armies, all of it was vulnerable if the enemy owned the sky. That's why the world's greatest powers poured everything they had into building legendary warplanes. Fighters that could climb faster, turn tighter, and hit harder. Bombers that could blot out the sun and turn entire cities into firestorms. Engines so powerful they shook the ground before the wheels even left it. Up there, dogfights weren't clean or heroic like the movies show. They were chaotic, violent, and fast. One wrong move and your plane became a burning coffin. Pilots could smell fuel leaks, feel bullets ripping through metal, hear the engine change pitch when something went wrong. Survival came down to seconds, instinct, and machines pushed way past their limits. Names like the P-51 Mustang, the Messerschmitt Bf 109, the Spitfire, and the Zero didn't just become famous. They became symbols of national pride and terror rolled into one. This is the story of those machines, the engines of destruction that turned the sky into the most unforgiving battlefield in human history. And once these warplanes ruled the skies, the war below was never the same again. Before the sky became a battlefield, war was mostly fought face to face. Soldiers dug trenches, ships traded broadsides, and generals thought in miles, not altitude. But by the late 1930s, military planners had a scary realization: the next war wouldn't stay on the ground. Aviation had grown up fast. What started as fragile canvas and wood planes in World War I had evolved into sleek, all-metal beasts with engines strong enough to rip through clouds and carry death across borders. The world was standing on the edge of an air power revolution, and nobody could afford to be left behind. Germany was one of the first to fully commit. The Luftwaffe wasn't built just to support ground troops. It was designed to dominate the sky from day one. Aircraft like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 were fast, deadly, and engineered for aggressive combat. Across the English Channel, Britain knew it was outmatched on land, so it put everything into defending its airspace. The Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane became last lines of defense, machines meant to stop invasion before enemy boots ever touched British soil. Meanwhile, the United States watched from across the ocean, learning hard lessons and upgrading fast. American engineers believed in range and reliability. They wanted fighters that could escort bombers deep into enemy territory and still make it home. In the Pacific, Japan followed a different philosophy: lightweight, ultra-maneuverable fighters like the Mitsubishi Zero, built for agility and long range, sacrificing armor for dominance in the early war. Factories became weapons themselves. Assembly lines replaced cavalry charges. Rivets, blueprints, and engine blocks mattered just as much as rifles. Entire cities were retooled to pump out warplanes at insane speed. Pilots trained knowing that technology changed every few months. Yesterday's unbeatable fighter could be tomorrow's flying target. The race for air supremacy wasn't just about bravery. It was about innovation, production, and adaptation. By the time the first bombs fell from the sky in massive numbers, the rules of war were already rewritten. The stage was set. The engines were warm. And once the warplanes went head-to-head, there was no turning back. The sky was about to decide the fate of the world. Once the war ignited, aviation didn't just support the fight, it became the fight. Every major battle now started above the clouds, where pilots hunted each other like predators and entire campaigns lived or died by what happened in the air. Fighter planes evolved at a crazy pace. Engineers pushed engines harder, strapped on heavier guns, and shaved weight wherever they could. Speed, climb rate, and firepower weren't just specs on paper, they were survival tools. Legendary warplanes began earning their reputations. The British Spitfire proved it could turn on a dime and still hit hard, saving the island during the Battle of Britain. The German Bf 109 showed brutal efficiency, climbing fast and striking first. In the Pacific, the Zero ruled early skies, outturning and outranging anything it faced, catching Allied pilots off guard again and again. For a time, it felt unstoppable. But air war wasn't just about fighters. Bombers became flying fortresses. Massive aircraft like the B-17 Flying Fortress and the Lancaster carried payloads capable of leveling factories, rail yards, and entire neighborhoods. These bombers flew deep into enemy territory, slow and exposed, relying on tight formations and defensive gunfire to survive. Missions lasted hours. Crews froze at high altitude, oxygen masks icing over, knowing enemy fighters were climbing to meet them. Every successful mission came at a cost. Planes limped home full of holes. Crews didn't always return. Airfields became places of constant tension, celebration when engines were heard on the horizon, silence when they were. Pilots learned to trust their machines like lifelines, memorizing every vibration and sound. One odd rattle could mean the engine was about to quit. One lucky hit could end everything. As victories stacked up, so did losses. Nations realized air superiority wasn't permanent. It had to be earned again and again, sortie by sortie. The war in the sky was building towards something bigger, a breaking point where technology, tactics, and human endurance would collide head-on. And when that moment came, the air war would never be the same. The turning point came when the sky itself seemed to catch fire. By the middle of the war, air combat hit a brutal peak. This wasn't about isolated dogfights anymore. It was full-scale aerial warfare, thousands of aircraft clashing over entire continents. In Europe, Allied bombers pushed deeper into enemy territory, and the Luftwaffe threw everything it had left to stop them. The air filled with contrails, tracer fire, and falling wreckage. If you were flying that day, you weren't asking if you'd get shot at, you were asking if you'd survive it. German pilots were skilled and experienced, but they were being worn down. Constant missions, shrinking fuel supplies, and fewer trained replacements started taking their toll. On the other side, the Allies adapted. New tactics, tighter formations, and better coordination slowly shifted the balance. But the real game changer came with long-range escort fighters. When aircraft like the P-51 Mustang arrived, everything changed. For the first time, bombers weren't flying alone. Enemy fighters could no longer attack and disappear without consequence. In the Pacific, confrontation took a different shape. Vast distances turned every mission into a gamble. Pilots flew hours over open ocean, knowing a single navigation mistake meant ditching into nothingness. Air battles raged over carriers, islands, and jungle-covered airstrips. Dogfights were fast, savage, and unforgiving. Experience mattered, so did adaptability. Planes once feared became vulnerable as enemies learned their weaknesses. The sky was no longer controlled by daring alone. Radar, radio communication, and coordinated command centers turned air combat into a system, efficient, relentless, and deadly. Battles were planned minute by minute, altitude by altitude. The romance of early air combat was gone, replaced by industrial-scale destruction. This was the confrontation phase of the air war, where survival depended on teamwork, technology, and endurance. And as losses mounted on both sides, it became clear only one approach to air warfare would dominate in the end. Just when it looked like air superiority had been figured out, the war threw a curveball. The machines everyone trusted, the fighters, the bombers, the tactics, suddenly weren't enough anymore. The twist in the air war wasn't just about better pilots or tighter formations. It was about a total shift in how destruction was delivered from the sky. Speed became king, and anything that couldn't keep up was suddenly on borrowed time. New technologies began creeping into the battlefield. Jet engines, once experimental and unreliable, finally showed their potential. Germany rolled out the Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. It was faster than anything in the sky, so fast that Allied pilots barely had time to react when it streaked past. For a moment, it looked like the balance could flip again. Traditional dogfighting rules didn't apply anymore. Propeller-driven fighters were chasing ghosts, but here's the twist: raw speed wasn't enough. The Me-262 came too late, in too few numbers with too many logistical problems. Fuel shortages, inexperienced pilots, and constant Allied bombing kept it from changing the war's outcome. The future had arrived, but the present was already lost. At the same time, Allied aircraft were reaching their peak. The Mustang, the Thunderbolt, and late-war naval fighters combined range, durability, and firepower in ways early designers could only dream of. Another twist hit closer to home: the human cost. Air crews were burning out, missions stacked up, survival odds dropped with every flight. Some bomber crews didn't even expect to finish their tour alive. The sky wasn't just killing machines anymore. It was grinding people down mentally and physically. Victory was becoming less about heroism and more about endurance. By the war's final stretch, it was clear the age of propeller-driven dominance was ending. The warplanes that ruled the skies had pushed technology to its absolute limits, and in doing so, they made themselves obsolete. The engines of destruction had rewritten the future of warfare forever. When the engines finally went quiet, the sky didn't celebrate, it just went still. Runways that once shook with takeoffs were left scarred and empty. The legendary warplanes that ruled the skies of World War II didn't end the war as heroes, they ended it as warnings. Proof of how fast human ingenuity can turn into mass destruction when survival is on the line. These machines won battles, saved nations, and at the same time erased entire cities and generations. The pilots who flew them weren't chasing glory the way movies make it seem. Most of them were just kids, barely old enough to vote, trusting their lives to aluminum skins and roaring engines. They learned fast or they didn't live long. For every ace whose name became famous, thousands more disappeared into the ocean, forests, and fields below. The warplanes didn't care who was brave or scared. They only responded to physics, fuel, and firepower. Here's the real lesson. Air superiority doesn't just win wars, it reshapes the world afterward. The technologies forged in World War II aviation led directly to the jet age, modern air forces, and the global power balance we still live with today. Airports replaced airfields. Commercial jets replaced bombers, but the DNA of those wartime engines is still in the sky every time a plane takes off. And there's a darker truth too. Once humanity learned how to dominate the sky, there was no going back. The idea that distance could protect civilians vanished forever. World War II proved that wars would no longer be limited to battlefields. They would reach anywhere an aircraft could fly. So when you hear a jet pass overhead today, remember this. It's not just noise. It's history echoing. It's the legacy of engines of destruction that once ruled the skies and changed warfare forever. If you want more deep dive aviation history like this, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share the video.